It's time to create your first character in Baldur's Gate 3. And maybe you've played the early access, maybe you've been waiting for this moment for 3 years, or maybe this is your first time back since Baldur's Gate 2 came out in the early 1900s. In today's video, I'm going to step you through the character creation process to discuss race options, class and or subclass choices, choosing your character's origin, and a number of other things. The goal here is to present this in a spoiler-free way, so I'll strictly be showing the character creation screen. The only time I'll jump into the game is for the action and bonus action section at the end of this video. On that note, I'll be discussing all the many D&D terms in this video as if you've never played D&D. So if you're a veteran of the subject, I apologize if that slows things down for you, but I'll try to be concise. If I do miss anything you were wondering about, I have an entire video dedicated solely to those terms you can find in the upper right-hand corner of the stream, or corner of the video. You can quickly navigate to each of the topics in this video that interest you the most, as I've broken it up by sections of the creation process for easy reference and quick navigation. Before we get started, please keep in mind that the only real permanent choices you make in the game are your origin, since that's your actual character's story, and your race, but everything else is just up for grabs. As it pertains to your companions, you can respect them entirely as well. Meaning Astarion, who starts as a rogue, can be respected into a multi-class if you prefer, or even just another class entirely. If you have any questions or want help, please swing on by my Twitch streams where I'll be playing a solo and a co-op playthrough, or simply drop into my Discord, both linked in the description and pinned comment. Let's get started here on the beginner's guide to creating your first character in Baldur's Gate 3. The very first thing you're actually going to choose when making your character is your difficulty. So if you want just a kind of a normal experience throughout the game, with the loaded kind of challenge that you would expect playing this engine, if you play Divinity Original Sin 2, you know that this game is actually quite challenging. So I would recommend playing balanced. If you don't really want much of a challenge at all and you really just want to experience a story, go with Explorer. But if you are a die-hard individual that just wants to get punched in the face a bunch of time, Tactician is going to be the route for you. My personal preference when playing video games is always to kind of err on the more difficult side. But if you've not played Divinity Original Sin 2, or Divinity Original Sin 1 for that matter, and you're not used to this system, even if you're a D&D veteran, Tactician might be very punishing for you. You can change this at any point in the game. I just want to be transparent about difficulty up front, because Tactician will probably be extremely punishing, while Balance will be probably a very good amount of challenge. So choose your difficulty as best fits you. Are you going to go more of a casual, just want to experience the story? Give me a good healthy challenge while making me kind of struggle a little bit, or I just want to get kicked in the dick. Here you go for your difficulty. After deciding your difficulty, the next big thing to choose is your origin. So you have three options, as it were. You have custom, origin characters, and then the Dark Urge. So the custom build out character is whatever you want it to be. It is dealer's choice. You choose exactly what you want. You don't get necessarily any unique individual character interactions, but instead you get to talk to all of the origin characters and take part in portions, well, majority of their story. Don't think you're punished for going with a custom character over an origin character. Custom characters can be literally whatever you want and how you want to envision yourself into Baldur's Gate 3. Now, the origin characters have set stories, and while you will be able to experience like 95% of their story, if you are a custom or Dark Urge character, you'll be able to drill down a little bit more on certain things that you maybe did not know, being outside of the individual, right? Being Astarion, you get to know more about his past because you are him. That's basically the way it goes. So one thing you should know, though, is all of these characters have preset looks and everything. You cannot change a single thing about who they really are, for the exception of their class up here. If you take them as a companion, if you take them for yourself, whichever one you choose, you can actually respec away from this once you find the corresponding character in Act 1. And if you don't encounter them in Act 1, they just appear for you in Act 2. So you'll be able to respec out of this if you don't want to. If you're like, I really want to play Shadowheart, but I just don't want to be a cleric, you'll be able to pretty quickly leave this if you so wish. And this goes the same if you choose it as a companion. Hey, I want to play with Shadowheart, but I want to be the cleric because I want to be a custom character or a Dark Urge character, and I want to be the one that does it. Then you can just respec her into maybe a rogue or whatever it is that makes the most sense for you. Now, the last option for origin is the Dark Urge. Now, if you know anything about the campaign, and this is not really a spoiler because it happens in the first two before you even press get to this screen, you already find out about this. You've been implanted with an illithid in your brain, an illithid tadpole, and you're fighting to, well, get rid of it. The dark urge is not that illithid tadpole. You had this dark, sinister urge within you even before that tadpole was present. And this thing goads you into doing all sorts of heinous, terrible acts. Larian has described the dark urge as a very dark and twisted playthrough. This is the only origin character that you can actually customize the appearance and class of at the start of the game. So if you want to be a Dragonborn or whatever you want to be, you can do so with the Dark Urge. But the Dark Urge will do things like, maybe you're talking to a character and it's like playing American Psycho and it's like, feed me a cat or something like that. You know, like go return some videotapes. But basically, you will have an urge to kill someone or do something that has a huge ramification on the game, or removing certain characters from the game that you are constantly wrestling and fighting with. It's up to you whether or not you want to do that. And it isn't going to be a very wild playthrough as they have described. But this is your permanent option, your permanent choice, either an origin character, the Dark Urge, or custom. So I wanted to talk about it first before jumping into the next permanent choice. Again, the other option that is one that you cannot respec is your selection of race. Now, if you've played previous D&D games or previous Baldur's Gate games, Neverwinter Nights, whatever it is, you're probably used to selecting a race that then has an effect on your abilities. Hey, you know what? I'm going to choose this elf because it's going to give me increased intelligence or increased wisdom. Or I'm going to choose this half-orc so I can get more strength or more constitution, whatever it is. Well, that is not the case anymore. And in early access, we actually did have the selection of ability scores tied to race. It's not like that. So when you select your race, and I know we're kind of jumping ahead, but let me just make my point here. When you select your race, if you jump over to abilities, you'll see a +2 and a +1. So what this is saying is you get the ability, regardless of race, to put 2 ability points into any one ability, and 1 ability point into any one ability. So for example, let's say I wanted to choose this drow. I'm going to be a sorcerer, but I'm going to want to put 2 points here into charisma. Okay, that's part of my +2 bonus that everyone gets. These are outside of the ability points that I am investing. And I've got this +1. Well, maybe I want to put it into charisma as well. Oops, I can't. It's either +1 or +2. So I'll do the +2 here. Let's just do a +1 into constitution. So now, rather than playing a race that has a set ability score bonus, all races get +2 and +1 to the ability scores that I want. So let's jump back here to race. Every single race will have these set race features, and these will grant them stuff like this: base racial speed, elven weapon training. So elves in particular gain proficiency to longsword, shortbow, and longbow, regardless of what class you select, which will then give you different specializations. So what this means, again, if you are a D&D noob, proficiency, we'll go ahead and press T, hover over this, says represents whether you are trained with a weapon type, tool, or skill. Provides a bonus to associated rolls, making you more likely to succeed. When you have a proficiency to a weapon or a skill, you'll be able to add additional dice to the roll in combat. If you have a proficiency with a specific type of armor, you'll be able to, you won't have disadvantage when you attack with that armor, and you'll be able to spell cast with that armor on. That's how proficiencies work. And furthermore, proficiencies will take bonuses from this proficiency bonus, which will only apply to skills, and we'll get to that when we talk about skills in a little bit. So outside of that, though, we get some things like dark vision, so you can see in the dark, or Fey ancestry. You have advantage. So what is advantage? And I said a disadvantage earlier, right? So advantage, it makes you more likely to succeed. Roll 2 dice, use the higher value. Disadvantage would be the opposite, rolling 2 dice and choosing the lower value. So whenever you have advantage on a saving throw, a weapon attack, a spell save, whatever it is, the game is telling you you're going to roll 2 dice and you're going to choose the higher of the 2. Conversely, again, if you have a disadvantage, you're going to roll 2 dice and choose the lower of the 2. So if you have a disadvantage on your a skill check for history, you're going to roll that and take all those modifiers into account. Don't worry, again, we'll talk about that when we get to the skills section. But you also, depending on your race, will have a sub-race. So elves can be either high elves or wood elves, which will then grant you additional features. So wood elves here get you an additional movement speed. High elves will give you an additional cantrip. Cantrips we'll talk about in that section. But if we also look at stuff like humans, they don't have a sub-race. They're just simply humans. But they still get their weapon proficiency with spears, pikes, halberds, and glaives, and also that armor proficiency, just to kind of hover over that really quick, prevents your armor and shields from blocking spellcasting or imposing disadvantage on attack rolls, which is quite lovely. They get that armor proficiency with light armor and with shields. Half-orc here, stuff like that. There are also certain things like Dragonborn, which their sub-race will dictate a lot of different things here, right? So if I choose green, I get specific actions as a green dragon, or as a green dragon with his ancestry, I get certain sub-race features. So just make sure you're kind of looking at all these little things, as they will be very important. And again, like I said, none of them are bound to these ability scores here. Don't you dare worry about it. Moving into class, we have the Giga Drow here, who's just ready to throw down. So selecting your class, you'll basically choose from any number of the 12 classes you have access to. And you'll just simply select this, and then you, depending on which class you take, you'll have a subclass option in this screen. Now, all classes have subclasses, or in the case of a wizard maybe, they have a school that they can specialize in. Depending upon your class, that subclass option will come at level 2 or level 3, or in this case, level 1. Paladins get their subclass immediately. So you would then click here and take a look at your different subclass options that you have, your different oaths as it were. It's worth noting too, if you're choosing a paladin, you have certain tenets you have to apply. If you break those tenets, there's a fourth hidden subclass called the Oathbreaker, which you would go ahead and fall into. But what you want to really look at when you're taking a look at these are kind of what pops up down here whenever you select any of them. It's going to show you stuff like any special class actions, not a lawsuit in this case, but a rage, for example. While raging, you are stronger and you deal 2 extra damage with melee and improvised weapons and when throwing objects. You have resistance to physical damage and advantage on strength checks and saving throws. Remember, like I said, advantage, you're rolling those 2 die. But there's another thing called checks. So checks here test whether an action is successful based on a dice roll, your ability modifier, any bonuses, and the check's difficulty class. What the hell are all those things? So an ability check is when it looks at what you would typically call your attributes or your stats if you're coming from another RPG. These are actually all of your abilities. That's an ability check. So what it's doing here is, let's take a look over here at strength. It's saying, hey, you know what? You're going to have to make a strength check on this boulder falling down, whatever it is. I'm just making up a scenario. Well, the difficulty of that is a 17, let's just say. And you have 17 strength. That's awesome. So I'm going to roll a die. And you know what? I got a 16. Dice rolls in this game are from 1 to 20. It's a D20 die. So I got a 16. Oh no, I'm going to fail. Well, actually, because I have all these things going for me, I get quite a few bonuses. So every 2 points after 10 attributes, you get +1 to this ability modifier. So our ability modifier is +3. So now that would give us from a 16 to a 19. But wait. We actually have proficiency with strength saving throws. As you can see right here, +5 to saving throws, 3 from strength, 2 from proficiency. So now our 19 just went to 21. That's not a critical, but it's still, we have passed the check because the difficulty was a 17. We rolled a 16, +5 put us to 21. So we're good to go. And this kind of reflects here, if I go ahead and press this button, it's going to show me all my proficiencies, weapons, armor, what have you. And then class features here. While not wearing armor, you add your constitution modifier to your armor class. Wearing heavy armor impedes your rage. What that means is typically your armor class is dictated by your armor and your dexterity. Well, as a barbarian, you're adding your armor, dexterity, and constitution together. So you just kind of read these things and it'll give you a little bit of information. Press T at any time to find out more. Okay, what is armor class? The higher armor class, the harder you are to hit. It's basically what the enemy would use as the difficulty to hit you if they're trying to roll against you. But We've talked about these proficiencies and stuff like that, but the other thing that your class option selects for you is your skills. So let's go into that. Let's give that its own little section here. In your skills, you can find by pressing abilities and then pressing change. So here are the list of all of your skills. You may customize your skill proficiencies in this list below. If you are proficient in a skill, you add a bonus to those skill checks, making you more likely to succeed. Well, what's that bonus? How do I know what I'm going to get? This is your proficiency bonus. Your proficiency bonus is added to ability checks and saving throws against skills you are proficient in, making them more likely to succeed. It also is added to attack rolls when attacking with weapons you are proficient with, increasing your chance to hit. So remember when we talked about being proficient in all of these weapons over here, simple weapons or martial weapons, rapiers, short swords, hand crossbows, you add your proficiency bonus, which is this +2. This will go up as you level. I think it's like level 3 or 4 becomes +3. So you would add this into any attack rolls, any skill checks, any saving throws, any ability checks. This thing is going to factor into it. Let's go ahead and go back to change here and take a look at this list. So you as a barbarian in this instance will get access to proficiency in certain things. My background, which we'll talk about in its own section, will give me certain proficiencies in certain skills. So my background right now is Acolyte. Again, we'll go into that on its own. But this will give me proficiency in religion and in insight. And I get my perception as a race proficiency. Well, I got 2 more options. What do I want to do? I am a barbarian, and what I can see here is it's kind of a little hard to tell. But if you look at intimidation and deception, they're 2 different colors. Those are the ones that are you're naturally more affinity to. You have a better affinity to. It's the easiest way to explain it without saying proficiency and confusing you. So I can click this and 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 add to those, right? I cannot add to deception because it is something I cannot be proficient in as a base barbarian. But it shows me nonetheless what my modifier is. So if I wanted to do a history check as a barbarian, I actually have a -1 to my roll. And I see this, that it is an intelligence-based skill. History, intelligence right below it, right? So let's look at athletics in this case. This is a strength-based skill. So I get a +5 because, I'm just saying right now, it's at a +3 because I have got 17 strength. Remember this? +3 to strength checks. Athletics counts as a strength check because it is a strength skill. Well, I want to be proficient in it. Well, it's going to give me a proficiency bonus into this currently, which is +2. So I have to make an athletics check in the game. I'm proficient in it. I get my +2 plus my +3 equals +5. That's a lot of just like basic arithmetic, but basically you just want to choose the ones that make the most sense for you and the type of character you have. There's no best option per se. I mean, yeah, of course there probably is, but who cares? Just choose the skills that fit the type of class you want to make. Do you want to make like an Indiana Jones level of bard? Well, then specialize in stuff like history and investigation. Or do you want to make a barbarian that has a particular affinity with nature? Well, then go nature and animal handling, and then maybe choose the wild heart subclass when you get to that portion. Make your skill choices fit the type of character you want to play, not the type of character who you want to succeed in specific roles. Because there's always going to be ways to modify these things outside of this screen. You can use bardic inspirations if there's a bard in your group. There's ways to increase it if you're a cleric, where you can use an actual spell to increase people's rolls. So don't worry about this too much, but just kind of role play it, kind of fit into the brain set of how do I want this character to feel? You know what? I want him to be just a brutal barbarian that is leaping and jumping around and shouting at people. So intimidation gets my specialization, and so does athletics. And certain classes will have access to more of these proficiencies. As you can see here, the bard has a ton, as denoted by each one of these little boxes. So if I don't have a box here, I cannot be proficient in it. Whereas if you're the bard, goddamn, you're proficient in everything. You are a skill monkey, as it is called. But those are your skills. Those are how they kind of work into you. And you can see everything put together if you kind of hover over each one of these. It kind of shows you a little bit more information on them. Just kind of look at these screens and hover over to give you the most information you need. Spells and cantrips are going to be another big portion of how you play, depending upon how you play. Are you going to be a wizard? Are you going to be a bard? Are you going to be a cleric? It all will depend, because you have cantrips and spells that are different. And you also have the ability to prepare spells. So preparing a spell is when you put a spell that you know, a list of spells that you know, and you prepare them to be cast. I'm using a cleric for this example, and I know that I can cast quite a few spells. So let me go ahead and click here to prepare spells. These are all the spells that I know. Well, I can only prepare 4 of them as dictated by my wisdom. Spellcasting ability for classes that need to prepare spells. It also affects how many spells can be prepared. So again, for this example, I'm focusing on it for clerics, druids, and rangers, right? So I'm going to say, let's just do this, this, and this. So we've cleared all of our prepared spells. And I'm going to choose this, this, like that. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. And now I can cast these spells. Now, if I want to swap these out, I must prepare them outside of combat. So let's say, you know what? I know I'm going to come up to a pretty spicy combat. And I'm going to want Healing Ward, I'm going to want Bane here, and Inflict Wounds. Okay, well now I have to actually take a rest. Once I take a rest, these spells are at the ready. It's the difference between this and, say, a sorcerer who just has access to these spells and needs to rest to get them back online. Choose the spells you know from the list below. Spells require spell slots to cast unless a feature states otherwise, which is another portion of the difference between spells and cantrips, which I'm going to get into in a second here. But your spell slots are dictated by the level of spells that you've got and your actual character level. So if I hover over this, this says a level 1 transmutation spell, and it requires a level 1 spell slot. So level 1 spells can be cast in any spell slot going up, right? Level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, doesn't matter. But a level 2 spell can only be cast in a level 2 spell slot or higher. It's why it's an important thing to kind of keep in mind right now. So again, just another reference, if I have a level 5 spell slot, I cannot cast a level 1 spell in, or I'm sorry, I can cast a level 1 spell in it, but I cannot cast a level 5 spell in a level 3 spell slot. It basically has to be its level or higher of a spell slot. And spell slots will replenish when you take a rest, as it says right here. Take a long rest and you regain your spell slots. Cantrips, though, are different. They are assumed to be level 0 spells, and you can cast them every turn. They do not use a spell slot, and you just cast them whenever you want. So this is why playing a warlock is particularly fun. Where is the warlock? Is particularly fun because you can use Eldritch Blast a ton of times, and then you can change Eldritch Blast throughout your journey as a warlock, doing a bunch of different things into it. So spells, cantrips, and preparing spells are 3 very important things. Just to quickly recap, cantrips are level 0 spells. You can cast them at will. You don't need to rest. Spells, you have to rest, and they require a spell slot. And depending upon what type of caster you are, if you're a cleric, for example, you will have to prepare your spells from your known spell list that you then will cast and swap out as needed. Before we move on into background, I want to talk very quickly about some of the more unique options you might take for certain classes that might confuse you. Like, okay, is that important? He didn't go through it in this video. So take the Bard, for example. We have starting instrument. You can just choose a starting instrument. Don't worry about it. It can be changed later by equipping a different instrument. You simply buy it. It's just the instrument you play. It doesn't really have any effect on anything. I just wanted to let you know in case you're kind of stuck in that portion. You're like, oh God, I don't want to choose the wrong thing. If you're a cleric, choosing your deity does not matter. Like if I choose light domain, let me choose my different race here. If I choose the knowledge domain, I can choose whatever deity I want. If you're a 5th edition D&D fan and you've played clerics, well, you know that typically your deity was locked by your domain or vice versa. So in this game, that is not the case. You just simply select a domain and you select a deity and you roleplay them as you wish. Another class option here is for fighter. You have many different options here for fighter on your fighting styles. So you adopt a particular style of fighting as your specialty. And you hover over this and it tells you exactly what each one gives you. Great weapon fighting, for example, when you roll a 1 or a 2 on a damage die for an attack with a 2-handed melee weapon, that die is re-rolled. Or 2-weapon fighting here, when you make an attack with your offhand weapon, which would be a bonus action, you can add your ability modifier to the damage of the attack. And I'll talk about that in a second here. But you have protection, great weapon dueling, great weapon fighting, and then dueling. Dueling, I want to talk about real quick. When you are wielding a melee weapon that is not two-handed or versatile in one hand and no weapon in the other hand, you deal an additional 2 damage with that weapon. This does not include shields. Shields are not weapons. So you can put a shield in your offhand and get 2 damage out of this. So if you want to be a sword and board style fighter, defense gives you more armor. Dueling gives you more damage as a sword and board because you have a shield in your offhand and a weapon in your main hand. And then protection allows you to impose disadvantage on attacks against your allies. Remember what we said about disadvantage? 2-die roll, you choose the lesser of the 2. Outside of that here, I don't think you have, oh, there it is. Ranger, you have favorite enemy, or I'm sorry, your favorite enemy, which case you're going to choose, in the past, you'd actually choose an enemy type. In this game, you choose basically a kind of a classification of ranger you are as far as what you hunt or what you know about. And this gives you certain cantrips or certain abilities that you have access to. Take, for example, Sanctified Stalker. You gain proficiency in religion and can cast Sacred Flame. Also Beast Tamer. Keep in mind, Beast Tamer is different than the Beast Master subclass. You're finding a familiar versus summoning a ranger companion. They are 2 very different things. This just gives you an additional ability. Ranger Knight here is nice because it also grants you skill proficiency in history and also armor proficiency with heavy. Don't just look right here. Just make sure you hover over them and read what it tells you you're going to get. Outside of that, you get Natural Explorer. So you get Wasteland Wanderer, Cold, Fire, or Poison, which is going to give you resistance to that specific damage type. Also, you have Urban Tracker, so if you want to get proficiency in Sleight of Hand, or Beast Tamer, which you've already seen, cast Find Familiar without expending a spell slot. That's what we were talking about earlier. But those are some of the unique things that are only available to certain classes, and I did want to talk about them. Your subclass option is just going to be up to you and what you want, so I haven't gone into that in this section here, but that's going to be dependent upon the type of class and subclass you want to play. And like I said, some of those will happen at different points, but everyone does get a subclass. So the last question here is, what about background? What is background? What does it do? How is it beneficial to you? Well, background basically determines certain things that you have access to or things that you know about because this is how your character was brought up in the world. Maybe you were a soldier at one point. You were trained in battlefield tactics and combat, having served in militia, mercenary company, or officer corps. Show smart tactics and bravery on the battlefield to enhance your prowess. Athletics is what you're going to get a skill proficiency in, and intimidation, which you're going to get a skill proficiency in. But this is also important because it doesn't show you in the screen, but it grants you inspiration. Inspiration is a resource that you can use to re-roll dice. Essentially, you'll have to do specific actions that coincide with your background. And they'll be obvious. You're not going to go, well, I wish I had known that. I would have done it. You'll have it conversationally or as part of the world interaction points. Hey, you talk to a veteran who's down on his luck and you give him a healing potion or you give him water or food or some money or whatever. Okay, well, that just tapped into your soldier background and you're going to get some inspiration. It'll tell you like soldier brackets and it gives you bonuses. Maybe you're an outlander because you're really good at navigating the wild wilds, or a noble or a guild artisan. What you should look at initially is how you want to play your character again. What type of paladin am I? Am I a former soldier? Am I someone who studied a lot of things before even becoming a paladin? Was I a cheapskate? Do I know about how to con people over? Maybe I was a criminal and I've reformed my ways. Whatever it is, you have to make the decision for yourself as to what the background is. And this will give you certain skill proficiencies that you might not get access to as it pertains to your class. Remember, we took a look at that barbarian. Barbarian doesn't get insight and religion as base things, so background is a way to get access to them if you want them. Just keep in mind that they are skill-based or ability-based nonetheless. Religion and insight are both wisdom and intelligence-based skills respectively, so just keep those things in mind when you are selecting your background. But please do make that background your choice, not what you think is the min-max option, because it doesn't matter. These are things to color your playthrough and make it more exciting and give you inspiration for rewarding you in playing the way that coincides with the role play you've created for your character at its onset. Coming back here into ability points, this is the last subject to talk about, and it is still a very important one. I'm going to clear this. And everyone starts with, essentially, go ahead and do this, 8 across the board. 8 strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And I've talked about this before, but your race no longer changes these things. It's selecting these bonuses, but it's all going to be 8. Regardless of what race you choose, regardless of what class you choose. The game will give you a hint. It'll say, hey, you know what? This is your primary ability. So primary ability, the way it works here in Baldur's Gate 3, the most important ability for your class. It influences your chance to hit and your damage output with weapon attacks or spells. If I change this to wisdom, or rogue, I guess, that's dexterity, it's just the same bit of information, but there's just more to it. So I don't want you to look at this and go, if I don't put anything in here, I won't do any damage. There's just a lot more going on here. So we're going to talk very quickly about these because they are going to be very much your choice based off of your class selection. So strength here, obviously, this is going to influence anything when it comes to melee weapons, but also determines how far you can jump and how much you can carry, which if you've played Divinity Original Sin 2, Larian loves to hide things in little places that you have to climb or jump to. Those are actually places you're going to want to jump to. Certain classes can jump further, like a barbarian or a rogue that goes down the thief subclass. So having someone with good strength to jump, don't think that that's a wasted ability. It's definitely going to be useful. But strength is definitely going to be crucial for any kind of melee class. It's how you're going to be doing a lot of your melee damage. Dexterity is also very crucial, and it's something I'm going to show you how it has an effect in your gameplay right now. So dexterity, the biggest things here is that A, it's going to affect your effectiveness with ranged and finesse weapons. Remember what I said here about strength helping you with melee weapons? Well, if the melee weapon is a finesse weapon, you'll use your dexterity. So here, I think rapier is a finesse weapon, but you'll use your dexterity regardless. I was going to use an actual example, but it doesn't show you. But it also affects your initiative and your armor class. Let me show you how that's beneficial here. We're going to increase this to 10. Remember, everything happens. 10 is like your base. 8 is considered a negative. So if I hover over this, see how it says 0? Bring it back to 8. Now it says -1. In fact, at -9, at 9, it gives a -1. But if we bring this to 12, it now says +1. But look at this little guy. He popped up over here. Hi, how are you? Initiative determines who acts first in combat. The higher your initiative, the earlier you take your turn. So this, when we have initiative, this gives us a +1 to it. Let's just jack this up as high as we can go, right? So now it is a +3. So dexterity has that ability to make it so you go first in combat. That's going to be crucial. Some classes have ways to just kind of manipulate that, but it's crucial to know. You're probably wondering, what the hell is initiative? It's just everything in Baldur's Gate 3 attacks sequentially, just like it does in Dungeons and Dragons. So having a high initiative allows you to go first in that long line of who goes first. Now, outside of that, I'm just going to clear this all out. We have our constitution. Now this, I think a lot of people might just go, hey, yeah, it just gives me hit points, right? It's a little bit more than that. And hit points are crucial to understand. So I'm going to hover over this, and it's going to say how much damage party members can take before being downed, and how much damage creatures and items can take before being killed or destroyed. You'll notice that regardless of the race, these numbers change based off of my class, right? So every single class has a set number that it starts off with for its hit points. The fighter is 8 + 1. The barbarian is 10 + 1, which is the highest. Wizard is 4 + 1, which is the lowest. So that number right here is going to be increased by your constitution. But another important thing that constitution does, it helps out with your concentration rolls. So every single one of these spells will have certain things that it kind of applies to, right? This spell will give me armor class, or this gives me blah, 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 blah. But you'll see at the very bottom here, it says concentration. Casters need to focus on maintaining this spell. They can only cast one concentration spell at a time, and their concentration might be broken when they take damage. So if you are concentrating on a spell, like you've cast Fog Cloud, it now remains in play until I swap off into another concentration spell, or my concentration is broken. And concentration is broken by doing a constitution check. Remember, like I said, hey, you're doing a constitution check? Well, now you're going to go take a look at what your constitution is, and you're going to roll against it. So if I'm doing a constitution check, or a concentration check, it's looking at my constitution. So don't think as a caster, where intelligence is going to be very important to me, I can neglect constitution like you've had I could do in the past. You cannot, because this is what allows you to concentrate on maintaining your spells active if you get hit. Outside of that, though, we do have intelligence. And remember, each one of these is going to apply to some form of skill. Keep those things in mind. So intelligence here is your memory and mental power. Improves spell casting for wizards. And that is nice here. It's going to just simply do that for you. This will also affect certain things based off of the type of class that you are. Intelligence, wisdom, and charisma are all linked to casting in some ways. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring this back down to 8. I'm going to go to my prepare spells because I'm a wizard, right? Well, prepare spells is just 1. And it shows me right here a bonus. Ooh, that's spell attack. Sorry. I thought that showed me my spell amount. It's not. I can go ahead and just put this up to 10. Well, nothing. Just says 1 out of 1 here, right? Let's bring it up to 12. Okay, well, now my modifier is +1 to intelligence. So my prepare spells is +1. Let's just go ahead and just bring this up as high as we can. Now I can prepare 3 spells as a wizard here. This works as well for cleric as it pertains to my wisdom. Now wisdom is going to be a little bit different here. Wisdom is going to be the ability that you would use to govern your cleric, druid, and ranger spells. So if intelligence is for wizards, wisdom is kind of the opposite here, but again for those, not opposite, but it's going to be the same, but for clerics, druids, and rangers. And again, it's going to be the same thing when it comes to preparing spells. Every +1 to your ability check is going to net you an additional prepared spell slot here for your druid, your cleric, your ranger. Again, just to kind of, this is down at 1, bring this up to +1 on our check. This is now a 2 prepared slot. And lastly, we have charisma. So charisma is a casting attribute or ability, right? For both your bard, paladin, sorcerer, and your warlock, but it also has some other things outside of it. It helps with traders' prices. Yes, that's a given, but granted, it's also going to help you out with your skills as it pertains to stuff like performance, persuasion, intimidation. It's kind of worth noting that, deception too. It's worth noting that like those intimidation and persuasion specifically are something you probably want to, you don't need to, you probably want to have a proficiency in as the main character, because you're going to be the driving force or engine behind a lot of conversations, and having the ability to just persuade people with even just a +1 to that is going to be quite nice for you. Now you can just completely skip it and just have 8 charisma, but even just having 10 here makes it so your persuasion or the persuasion rolls here or your intimidation rolls will just at least be like at a baseline for all intents and purposes. Clearly we need a little bit more here, so let me do that. There we go. That kind of puts it a little bit more on the baseline. But still, my point remains that charisma is one of the ones that you need for your warlock, your paladin, your bard, your sorcerer, but it's also one you kind of need as a main character. So don't sleep on charisma just because you're not getting health from it or initiative from it or strength from it, or you're not a caster. You still kind of need it conversationally if you are the main character. Now, lastly too, you don't need it to be 15. I think just 10 is a good solid place, or at least 12 to have for your charisma for any kind of proficiency rolls you'll need against it. I suppose, too, it is worth bringing up that you do have the edit appearance button where you can just kind of go crazy with all of these things. This is so much dependent upon you and how you want to make your character. So there's no reason for me to explain anything in this section. But I guess in a video about character creation, it is worth talking about these options because they do exist within this portion of the game. You can also kind of swap to different character creations that you've made in the past using stuff like this and having randomized appearance buttons, something that has been requested in the early access but was not here before. So going like that, boom, there you go. Okay, so I've gone through 3 randomizations. I get to swap back and forth between them and kind of decide which ones I've got. You might not know that existed, so I wanted to kind of quickly bring it. Oh my god, this guy's the Lord of Billy Goats. Good lord. Guy's terrifying looking. But again, you have your appearance configuration for the character creation in Baldur's Gate 3. Loading into the game real quick, I want to talk about actions and bonus actions because it's something that's going to be part of the character creation process. Now, this is literally right after you press the proceed button, so there's no spoilers here. And I'm using Asterion, which is a origin character. So what you'll see here are action, bonus action, cantrips, and you'll also see spell slots if you are a caster character. Those things are just important when it comes to creating your characters, in case it says something like, hey, this grants you a bonus action, an action. And it's just kind of worth noting them because you might not understand what those really mean. So anything here that says action is, you guessed it, it is an action. Actions are typically things that you're going to have direct influence on the world, in the sense that you're going to attack something, use a spell, which will also then use a spell slot, or maybe you will help someone, or jump, or hide, whatever it is. Jumping is also a bonus action, sorry about that. Hiding over here, throw, dash, help, improvised melee weapon, using your actual melee weapons, which is an important thing to kind of note as well here. Those things are all part of your actions, and you will get one action per turn. Then you have a bonus action. Now, depending upon who you are, certain things can happen with those bonus actions. And if you are a rogue, you can actually do certain things with your bonus actions that other classes cannot. But for all intents and purposes, your bonus actions, if I click this, are these right here: jump, shove, and dip. As a rogue, you'll get access to stuff like dash as a bonus action, which is really cool. Where is it? Right here. So it allows you to move a little bit when you are in a combat situation. But also, too, you'll have stuff like sneak attacks. If you are dual wielding weapons, those weapons, the offhand is typically a bonus action. So you'd use your action and then your bonus action, because that's the thing. You use actions and bonus actions once in a turn. And then once your turn is up, it cycles back to you and you can do that again. Now, outside of this list are reactions. So maybe you chose the fighting style protection, which says, hey, you can use this as a reaction. Meaning, if something happens in the world, you can then use that ability as, well, simply put, a reaction. And just simply clicking these allows you to see, okay, these are all my actions. Using a potion is my action, or scroll over Vivify. This is my bonus action. These are my cantrips. If I had spells, I click the spell slot button corresponding to each spell slot, and it would show me which spells I can use in that spell slot. It's a very user-friendly UI, but I just wanted to kind of point these things out because you might need this knowledge as you're going through your character creation process, and you might not understand what an action, a bonus action, or a reaction is. So that concludes our video here on the character creation for Baldur's Gate 3. I'm going to be making more videos on certain mechanics, how or what multiclassing really is, certain things on how to approach them, what all the actions are, and stuff like that. You can find those linked in the end of this video in my Baldur's Gate playlist, and you'll also find them as I release them by subscribing, commenting, all that kind of fun action. Well, you can find them if you subscribe, but you should also comment because that does help me out a ton. If you have any other questions, though, please by all means go ahead and let me know in the comments section below. And I'll be on the lookout for a ton more content coming your way as it pertains to Baldur's Gate 3. But have a good one and take care.